He was born into immense wealth, raised inside one of the most powerful families in Saudi Arabia. Yet by 2001, his name would become tied to one of the darkest days in modern history. His life followed a path few could have predicted, a journey from privileged childhood to global fugitive, from quiet student to the architect of violent extremism. Every step pushed him further into an obsession with conflict, identity, and a belief that the world had betrayed him. His choices shaped nations, reshaped wars, and left scars that still echo today. This is not just the story of one man. It is the story of how ideas turn into movements, how anger becomes action, and how a single life alters the course of global history. And it begins long before the world ever knew his name. The modern Middle East was already a region under strain long before Osama bin Laden emerged as a known figure. Decades of conflict, shifting alliances, and deep political wounds shaped its landscape. Nations struggled to balance tradition with rapid social change, while foreign powers competed for influence. The region carried memories of older wars and unresolved disputes, each adding weight to the years ahead. In many communities, economic gaps widened, creating frustration that mixed easily with rising ideological voices. Some people searched for identity in faith, others in nationalism, and others in movements that promised purpose through confrontation. As new ideas spread, some leaders believed the world was changing too quickly, while others feared it was not changing fast enough. The tension between these forces created a fertile ground for groups seeking to redefine power through conflict. Extremist networks began forming across borders, driven by anger toward foreign influence and internal corruption. Their messages found space to grow in areas marked by poverty, instability, and distrust of political institutions. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan added a powerful spark to this already tense environment. Fighters from different nations traveled to the conflict, believing they were defending a cause greater than themselves. Many gained experience, connections, and ideological certainty that would later shape future militant movements. The battlegrounds of Afghanistan became more than a war zone. They became a crossroads where ideas hardened and alliances formed. Meanwhile, the world outside the region often misunderstood these growing currents. Some saw them as distant problems, others as tools in geopolitical struggles. These misinterpretations only deepened the divide between local realities and international policies. As pressure built, a new generation began to see violence as a path to influence, believing they were acting against forces that had long betrayed them. It was in this turbulent environment, where old systems collided with new beliefs, that the path of Osama bin Laden would begin to form. His early life, shaped by wealth and tradition, would soon intersect with a world edging toward conflict. And the choices he would make inside this shifting landscape would change global history in ways few could have imagined. Osama bin Laden was born on March 10, 1957, in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, into one of the wealthiest and most influential families in the kingdom. His father, Mohammed bin Laden, had built a massive construction empire closely linked to the royal family. The household was shaped by strict order, strong religious values, and a deep respect for authority. Despite the luxury surrounding him, Osama grew into a quiet child who leaned toward discipline and faith rather than the comforts offered by his status. As he moved through his early education, teachers noticed a seriousness in him that set him apart from many of his peers. He studied religious texts closely and absorbed ideas taught by conservative scholars who shaped much of his worldview. While other children of wealthy families traveled and embraced modern lifestyles, he often chose a more reserved path. The The tension between traditional values and modern influences in Saudi society played a subtle but important role in his development. He saw the rapid changes around him and grew increasingly drawn to strict interpretations of faith as a source of certainty. His family life also carried emotional complexity. With dozens of siblings and a lineage spread across many households, identity was shaped not only by privilege but by competition, discipline, and expectation. He rarely showed outward rebellion, yet internally he gravitated toward ideals that promised clarity and purpose. By his teenage years, this tendency deepened, creating a foundation that made him receptive to powerful ideological messages spreading through the region. As political tensions in the Middle East sharpened, global events began to shape his thinking. Conversations about foreign influence, regional struggles, and religious duty circulated among students and scholars he admired. He grew increasingly concerned about the direction of the Muslim world and believed that outside forces were playing a destructive role. These ideas formed long before he took any action, but they built the emotional groundwork for the choices he would later make. By the late 1970s, Osama bin Laden was no longer just a quiet student from a wealthy family. He was a young man searching for meaning in a world he saw as divided and threatened. And the moment that would give him that sense of purpose, one that would change the course of his life, was approaching with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 became the moment that reshaped Osama bin Laden's life. Until then, he had lived in comfort, guided by strict beliefs, but distant from any battlefield. The news of the invasion struck him deeply. He saw it not only as a political event, but as a call to defend what he believed was under threat. The emotional pull was strong, mixing faith, identity, and a sense of duty. This was the turning point that gave him the purpose he had been searching for. When he first arrived in Pakistan, he found a world overflowing with refugees, wounded fighters, and young men who believed they were defending their faith against a powerful enemy. The scenes he witnessed left a lasting mark. Instead of looking away, he felt drawn closer. With access to wealth and resources, he began supporting the resistance, funding supplies, and helping build a network that connected fighters from different countries. His role quickly shifted from supporter to organizer, earning him respect among those who admired his commitment. As he spent more time in the region, his involvement deepened. He began traveling near the front lines, witnessing battles and feeling the intensity of the conflict. These experiences hardened his worldview. The war strengthened his belief that armed struggle was not only justified, but necessary. He formed relationships with influential militant figures, many of whom would later join him in creating Al-Qaeda. The training camps, the shared hardships, and the growing sense of ideological unity turned him from a wealthy volunteer into a leader shaped by conflict. The war also changed him psychologically. The admiration he received fueled a sense of mission. The violence around him convinced him that victory came through endurance and sacrifice. His speeches grew more forceful, his ideas more rigid, and his belief in a broader struggle more pronounced. The battlefield transformed him from a quiet young man into a figure looking for a larger stage. By the time the Soviet forces began to withdraw, bin Laden had found his life's direction. The conflict had given him experience, influence, and a network of loyal followers. Most importantly, it had given him a sense of destiny. He returned from the war not as the man he once was, but as someone convinced he had a mission far greater than anything he had known before. When the Afghan war drew to a close, Osama bin Laden carried with him more than memories of battle. He carried a growing belief that conflict was the only path to change. The networks he built during the war did not disappear. they evolved. Fighters who had once joined him in Afghanistan began looking for direction, and he stepped forward to guide them. In the late 1980s, he helped form a new organization, one that would operate beyond borders and pursue a far wider struggle. This network became known as Al-Qaeda. In these early years, bin Laden spent time shaping his message. He believed that a new era of confrontation had begun and that he was meant to lead a movement built on violent resistance. He used his wealth and influence to establish training camps, supply routes, and communication channels. Recruits arrived from different countries, drawn by the stories of Afghanistan and the certainty in his voice. He spoke with calm conviction, framing his mission as a duty rather than a choice. For many followers, this certainty was powerful. His relationship with Saudi Arabia began to change. He openly criticized the kingdom's reliance on foreign military support, especially during the Gulf War. His words angered officials and pushed him into isolation. When he left Saudi Arabia, the break was complete. Exile deepened his resentment, reinforcing the belief that he was standing against forces much larger than himself. In Sudan, and later in Afghanistan, he found space to expand his operations. He built alliances with armed groups, created financial networks, and used propaganda to strengthen his influence across regions. Throughout the 1990s, Al-Qaeda grew more structured. Meetings took place in secrecy, and plans were developed behind closed doors. Bin Laden's leadership became more defined. He was not the strongest fighter or the most experienced commander, but he carried an unwavering ideological focus that shaped the group's direction. His message framed the world as locked in a long struggle, and he encouraged his followers to see themselves as part of something historic. As the organization expanded, its actions became more coordinated and more deadly. Attacks on foreign targets marked Al-Qaeda's growing ambition and revealed its willingness to strike far beyond the Middle East. These operations signaled a shift from regional conflict to a global campaign. Intelligence agencies took notice, governments issued warnings, and the world slowly began to understand the scale of the threat taking shape. By the end of the decade, the groundwork for a new era of violence had been laid. Bin Laden had risen from a wealthy volunteer to the leader of a global extremist network. His voice carried across continents, his plans moved through hidden channels, and his followers prepared for actions that would shock the world. The stage was set for the darkest chapter of his life, and for events that would alter history. By the mid-1990s, Osama bin Laden's movement had shifted into its most dangerous phase. The ideas he once formed in the mountains of Afghanistan had hardened into an ideology centered on global confrontation. His network became larger, more disciplined, and far more violent. Hidden training camps prepared followers for missions planned in secrecy, each operation designed to send a message far beyond the battlefield. The world was beginning to feel the weight of his decisions, even when the full scale of his plans remained unseen. During these years, Al-Qaeda carried out a series of attacks that marked its rise as a global threat. The violence was carefully coordinated, targeting places meant to draw worldwide attention. Each event added to the widening fear and growing tension across nations. Intelligence agencies struggled to track the group's movements, discovering too late how deeply its influence had spread. Bin Laden's ideology became more rigid, his language more extreme, and his plans more ambitious. He viewed these attacks not as isolated events, but as steps toward a larger confrontation he believed was unavoidable. Inside his inner circle, the tone grew harsher. Trust was limited, secrecy was absolute, and loyalty was expected without question. As international pressure increased, he moved further into isolation. Safe houses replaced open gatherings, coded messages replaced public speeches, and a sense of impending conflict became constant. His followers saw him as a symbol of resistance, while the world beyond his network viewed him as a growing danger. Both sides understood that something larger was building. The culmination came on a morning that reshaped global history. The attacks of September 11th brought unprecedented destruction and left entire nations in shock. The emotional, political, and human impact spread instantly across the world. Families mourned, governments responded, and the international order shifted in a single day. This event marked the peak of Al-Qaeda's violence and the moment bin Laden became the most sought-after figure on the planet. Yet behind the global reactions stood a simple truth. His actions had crossed a line from which there was no return. The darkness he had embraced now surrounded him completely. His network, once expanding, now prepared for the backlash it knew would come. And from that point forward, every step he took would lead toward his downfall. After 2001, the world turned its full attention toward Osama bin Laden. The attacks he helped plan had brought global forces into motion, and the pursuit of his network became relentless. What had once been a wide web of training camps, alliances, and movement across borders began to shrink. Governments cooperated in ways they never had before, sharing intelligence, closing financial channels, and dismantling safe routes that Al-Qaeda had depended on. For the first time, bin Laden felt the weight of a world closing in. He moved between remote hideouts, each one more isolated than the last. Mountains, tribal regions, and secret compounds became temporary refuges. Life narrowed to dim rooms, small groups of trusted followers, and constant fear of discovery. The freedom he once used to shape a global movement disappeared. Messages were delivered slowly, often by hand, and every word carried risk. Inside these confined spaces, he watched the network he built weaken under pressure. As international operations expanded, many of his closest allies were captured or killed. Cells that once operated independently now struggled to survive. Countries strengthened their defenses, and communities that had once provided cover became wary of involvement. Bin Laden's influence faded as communication grew more difficult and the world's focus remained fixed on ending his reach. He became a symbol of a movement that was losing ground, trapped by the very secrecy that once protected him. His life took on a different form: long periods of silence, hidden routines, and the lingering tension of being hunted. Reports of his location surfaced and disappeared, each one fueling global determination to bring the search to an end. He remained cautious, but the net around him tightened. What had begun as a mission of expansion had turned into a struggle for survival. Years passed in this shadowed existence. The man once surrounded by fighters, influence, and open declarations was now confined to carefully guarded compounds, relying on trusted couriers and extreme secrecy. The movement he founded no longer operated with the same unity or strength. The world's patience had not faded, and intelligence efforts grew more precise. The downfall of Osama bin Laden was not a sudden collapse, but a long, slow erosion, one that stripped away his power, his connections, and finally his safety. And as global forces continued their pursuit, the final chapter of his life approached, bringing an end to a manhunt that had shaped a decade. On May 2nd, 2011, the long pursuit of Osama bin Laden came to an end in Abbottabad, Pakistan. The operation that located him was the result of years of intelligence gathering, shifting strategies, and quiet determination from agencies around the world. In the final moments of his life, he was no longer the powerful figure who once shaped global events. He was a fugitive living in a secluded compound, separated from the movement he had created and cut off from the world he once influenced so deeply. His death sent waves of reaction across countries. For many, it was a moment of relief, a sign that justice had finally reached a man responsible for unimaginable violence. For others, It raised deeper questions about the future of global security. Governments strengthened counter-terrorism efforts, aware that removing a leader did not erase the ideology he had helped spread. Communities affected by years of conflict felt a mixture of closure and continuing grief, knowing that the damage caused by his actions could not be undone. Al-Qaeda weakened significantly after his death, fractured by internal disputes and external pressure. Yet the legacy of the movement he shaped continued in new forms, influencing groups across different regions. His ideas did not disappear, they changed shape, creating long-term challenges for nations trying to prevent the rise of new extremist threats. The world had entered an era where security, intelligence cooperation, and vigilance remained essential. Reflections on his life often returned to a single theme: how one individual, driven by rigid ideology and shaped by regional conflicts, could alter global history. His story became a lesson on the dangers of extremism, the impact of unresolved grievances, and the power of events that cross borders. The world he left behind was deeply marked by fear, division, and the determination to prevent such violence from reappearing. Osama bin Laden's death closed a chapter, but did not erase the questions his actions raised. The scars of his decisions remain in policies, in memories, and in the ongoing efforts to understand how extremism takes root. His legacy stands as a reminder of the destructive force of hardened beliefs and the importance of addressing the conditions that allow such ideologies to grow.